Ladies, gentlemen, and nightfarers of all ages, one of the big main additions in the Forsaken Hollows DLC, something that every player is basically forced to interact with whether you want to or not right out of the gate, is the Great Hollow Shifting Earth. This is the new Shifting Earth as part of the DLC, and it is by far the most involved of any Shifting Earth in the game, being that it is essentially an entirely new map, completely contained underneath Limveld. The layout is totally different from the standard game map, and the points of interest are, for the most part, pretty different too. Some of them are functionally quite similar with minor changes, others are totally new, and as with all of the Shifting Earths, there is a puzzle or objective for you to work out and complete in order for the potential to gain quite a bit of power. And this one, on top of being ridiculously complex, also has quite a bit of power to offer you if you know how to do it right. So today we're going to go over a general overview of this Shifting Earth. We'll talk about what's going on, we'll go over the objectives, how to complete them, and what it unlocks and the power you get for doing it. We'll go over some general layout knowledge so you know the real important places to hit. We'll talk about anything that makes any points of interest different than their base normal map version really, and then some general traversal tips to help you get around in this completely different location. First things first, the map is totally different. I'll be spending the majority of this talking about the crystals and stuff to do with that and the main important related areas where the real juice and power is, as I think that's the main thing that you would come here to learn, and honestly, if you don't interact with those parts of the map, you're just going to get less value than if you did the regular map, full stop. But to just sort of start with the stuff that I want to blitz through, even the familiar point of interest types are often not going to be the same as you are used to. I won't go into all of them here, so let's just take this poison rune as an example. Standard map version of a rune is just a collapsed structure, boss at a high point, some chests in a room tucked underneath, not much else going on. Maybe a sort of mini boss for a bonus dormant power in some of the cases. The poison rune on the west of the Great Hollow map has a boss up at the top, which is Curseblade. Then if you go on the northwest side out of the rune, there's another boss spawn, which is an avatar for me here. Then you can actually go under these runes as they have a whole vertical section, and in the middle of this undersection of this area is another boss, spider scorpions in this case. I think most people playing the Shifting Earth would do something like go to the runes, find the top boss that you'd normally expect to find at the runes, then just go somewhere else, because they don't realize how different these places are, how many bosses are this densely placed together. So think of this as a PSA to just discard your current concepts of how these points of interest work and explore them properly in the Great Hollow. Take the time to learn them. It will make your first few runs a bit slower and maybe less efficient, but this map has a lot of ways you can build power if you know what to do. That aside from runes, there are cathedrals and mage towers that function a bit differently as well, just in terms of number of important enemies and layout and stuff like that. There are mines on the extremities of the map that are functionally the same as the normal map, and the churches on the map are actually the same as normal too, for the most part, outside of just being visually a bit different. There are merchants around the place like normal, but there is also the possibility of a super merchant to spawn, which has this special orange symbol on your map, so you know that you should go to him. And this is like the equivalent of the merchant town locations from the normal map. It is a super merchant that sells things like Erdtree's Favor or Ritual Sword Talisman. Big good when he exists. There's an interesting note that a lot of these points of interest apply to both elevation levels on the map as well, even though they might not show up there, so really explore vertically. As well, just to mention it, there's this spot here just to the west of the Great Crystal itself that seems to be a guaranteed high-level boss spawn every time, which is just good to be aware of. And it's also worth knowing there are no Everjails on this map, so prepare for that accordingly. That said, there's also standard things that can appear here, like invasions can happen. Gladius invasion, for example, is a massive issue on this map because if you don't interact with the Shifting Earth properly and do the big activities related to it, the value is less than the regular map. And Gladius takes so much time to deal with that it just sort of torpedoes your ability to do that properly, so be aware of that as well. On top of that, a lot of people have expressed confusion about how to just go around or do things on this map, and the best general advice that I can offer is that the map is incredibly vertical. Yes, there are plenty of pits you can jump off into and die instantly by accident. Yes, the layout seems convoluted, but once you understand the sort of generalities of what is important to do on this map, it starts to get a lot simpler. On that note, what is the Great Hollow all about? The main sort of objective, as far as the game makes it clear, is that you need to interact with the big blue crystal in the middle of the map. But in order to do this, you need to interact with some medium-sized crystals around the map and resonate with them. Here is a map that somebody made of all the potential spawn locations for these crystals, both on the upper and lower your map layer. These spawns will be tied to your map seed, which is chosen when you go into the actual expedition, and this means that not every crystal will spawn every expedition. And it seems in general you will get 6 of these crystal locations to spawn at most in one run. But I don't know if it's any different in group runs, but in solos at least, you only need to interact with 3 of these crystals to complete the puzzle. Knowing these locations lets you try to complete this on day 1, which is why I'm showing you this, but it's worth noting that once you enter day 2, all crystals on your map will be marked by a symbol to try and direct you to go interact with them. Either way, once you've interacted with these crystals, once you've hit up to 3 of them, the great crystal in the center will crack open and pop, which will give you a notification on screen when it happens, and then you can go to the crystal itself in the center and just walk on top of it to find the power itself, Favor of the Great Hollow. This breaks the crystal curse, it gives you increased ultimate arc gauge recovery when you're out of flask, and it also opens up like a super spirit spring on the crystal that you can use to get around the map super easily from the middle. This brings us to our next point, which is the Crystal Curse. The Crystal Curse is an area-specific debuff that affects 2 specific parts of the map. The southeast part of the map, which is the big castle-looking area with the tower symbol on the rear of it. This is one of the areas. The northwest area, with the other castle and the tower adjacent to it, that is the other area. If you enter these areas before dealing with the Great Crystal and getting the power from it, you will receive the Crystal Curse. This is a debuff that locks you at 50% of your maximum health while you stay in that area, so it is quite dangerous. That said, the real main benefit of clearing the Great Crystal and getting the Favor of the Great Hollow buff is that it allows you to interact with these areas without nerfing yourself and making it really hard, because these areas are incredibly valuable. And I would say, generally speaking, if you can, you want to have the ability to spend your entire day 2 working away at the castles and towers. These are the sort of main major locations of actual value and power gain on the map. The castles themselves are best thought of like the castle at the center of the standard map, except that there are 2 of them and they are far away from each other. They have lots of goodies, lots of potential runes to gain, and lots of chests, boxes, and item containers of all kinds. Specifically starting with the one to the southeast, the bottom right castle, there's 1 boss and a mini boss on the left side, and then a big boss on the right side over to the north. The north side boss is very hard to miss, just go up the stairs from the front entrance and you will find it in a little open area on the way up. On the left side, there is a spawn in the sort of like watery area underneath. Sometimes this is a mini boss like the Golden Hippo, sometimes it's a full-on boss like a Divine Beast Warrior instead. And then up on the platform beside it is a more proper boss spawn location as well. Outside of that, there are plenty of chests throughout, especially in the upper areas of the castle if you climb up, and some in the sewers if you go down too. Moving on to the other castle then, on the top left, the northwest castle, there are 2 major boss spawns here, and generally speaking this seems to be the more valuable of the 2 castles, but also the more difficult of the 2 just because the increased rarity and rune value also comes because of harder bosses. As the other castle seems to be 1 major boss, 1 minor boss, this one is 2 major bosses and some pretty hefty potential mini bosses too. The way I recommend approaching this castle is from underneath. There is a sewer system that you can access from either the left or right side quite easily, and directly in the middle of the sewers under the symbol itself of the castle is an interactable crystal. Breaking this open creates a spirit spring. Directly jumping up the spirit spring is a courtyard that has 1 very major boss, Godskin duo in this instance for me. Here they are from a better angle so you can see them properly, but also down where the crystal was, where the spirit spring is. After you break it open, the room behind it becomes accessible too, and that is a location for a second major boss. So 2 big bosses right next to each other here. And you can use the spirit spring to then jump up to the higher layers of the castle quite easily, letting you explore the ramparts as well. Both of these castles have a rotating cast of mini-boss as well, and mini-boss locations too, based on the seed, like the regular main map castle, and these all drop dormant powers, so keep an eye out for any enemy that seems a couple of tiers above the rest, but those are the main important parts to be aware of. As for the towers, these are positioned in places where they clearly want you to do the castle to be able to get to the tower, but you can skip right to the towers with a little bit of map knowledge and if you just run through stuff. But also, for example, the left tower can just be jumped down to from the flight path that exists northeast of it right here. This is important to know because, again, the castles are very, very good, but the tower is where the real juice is contained if you're strong enough to take it on. These places are essentially a high-powered boss gauntlet. 1 major, large structure to deal with and manage. When you enter the building, you enter the first boss room, you will get a notification popping up telling you that the room is pulsing with a certain kind of energy. And this seems to give buffs to both enemies and players when applying those types of things. For example, I've seen blood loss, I've seen magic, I've seen rot, which means if you are using those things, they're more powerful against your enemies, and if your enemies are using those things, they're more powerful against you. There's even one that is healing that applies to both you and all of the enemies, so you get just a constant sort of steady source of healing, but the bosses will also just be constantly healing, which can be a little bit of of a detriment. These towers are not easy, but they are very rewarding. After you defeat that boss, a fog wall will lift from behind them, revealing a path up to the second floor of the building, inside of which is another big boss room. Defeat them and the path will open behind them for a third big boss room. Defeating that boss will open a path to the top of the tower where you can pick up the real proper power-up of the Shifting Earth, False Vision of a Great Rune. This gives you faster ultimate art gauge charge just in general, as well as extra merc when you finish your run, which is a very solid power in general. As well, the bosses inside give fantastic rewards. The first floor boss has a chance of dropping a legendary reward, and also gives you 60,000 runes, but the second and third floor bosses seem to be either guaranteed legendary rewards, or just generally extremely high chance of them, and they give you 120,000 runes each. As well, it's worth mentioning as you defeat each boss, it will put up spirit springs outside of the tower, so if you die on like the third floor boss, you have an easy way back up instead of having to run the whole way up the tower. So in total, what you get from doing this, from clearing one full tower, this will get you essentially half of the runes that you need to hit level 15, because that's 300,000 runes total, 2 legendary rewards, a chance at a third legendary reward, and then also the False Vision of a Great Rune from the top as well. This is the main juice of the Great Hollow. It is these towers. With that mentioned, both towers seem to be functionally identical, they both seem to give the same power up at the top as well, and completing them is so involved that I would say it's very unlikely you are ever going to clear both towers in the same expedition, unless you're like a god of Nightreign basically. That said, to go over a sort of general recommendation of what to do really for a perfect run on the Great Hollows, you'd want to search for the resonance crystals on day 1 so that you don't have to faff around with those on day 2. As well, you want to get all of your churches on day 1 as much as possible for the same reason. Outside of that, day 1 is mostly just about trying to get as many easy runes as you can so you can get some level ups and then maybe a weapon upgrade if possible to get you ready to fight stuff in a place like the tower. Day 2, your main goal, if day 1 went flawlessly, is to do one of the 2 towers, then also one of the 2 castles. You could do the castle first, as it will make the tower easier to do as you'll have more power going in, but the tower is where the real value is, so you just want to make sure that you get that done no matter what, because again, if you don't do the tower, you're just going to end up weaker than you would without the Great Hollow map. That said, the final thing that I want to talk about today is just some general traversal and map knowledge that's useful to have here, because getting around this map can be quite difficult. Take advantage of the flight trees. There are exits of these always close to the start of another, so you can use them to basically circle around the entire map if you want to. These can take you around the map quite quickly, as long as you have an idea of where you actually want to go, and there's even one on the lower level that you should be aware of too. As well, spirit springs are so good on this map too. Make sure you check both the upper and lower layer of the map when you're looking at it while traveling, because a spirit spring on the lower layer could help you get to where you want to be on the upper layer. So knowing where they are as you're moving is quite important. Again, you can use the flight paths and the vertical nature of the map to sort of skip intended paths too, like the tower on the northwest we already mentioned, but even stuff like you can forcibly drop onto the Great Crystal from the side you aren't intended to approach using these flight paths too, so use and abuse these trees. Use and abuse the spirit springs, including the giant spirit spring that happens in the middle of the map after you clear the Great Crystal part of the event. Outside of that, the other main thing to note is these 2 portal symbols on the map as well, which are actually exactly what they seem. These are connected to the tower on each side of the map, and going through the portal on either end will connect you back to the other portal. Basically an immediate fast travel from one tower to the other, from the top left of the map to the bottom right. And this would be the thing that you would use to complete both towers in one run, but again, even with that cutting out the travel time, it's still a pretty Herculean task, especially without knowing where the circle will be on day 2. That pretty much does it for today then, everyone. We'll have more of a detailed, like proper strategy guide coming out for the Great Hollow relatively soon as we learn more and test more, but we wanted to get this out for you guys as soon as possible, just because of all the frustration and confusion I've seen in the community that they're having towards this new map, because it is quite a lot. So hopefully this helps sort of unlock its secrets and help you actually get the real value out of it by getting through the Crystal Curse and blasting up the tower. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.